Here we go. My name's Todd.
This is Cathy.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen Parenting Radio. This is podcast number 773. Why listen to Zen Parenting Radio? Because you'll feel outstanding, and always remember our motto, which is that the very best predictor of a child's well-being is, in fact, a parent's self-understanding. On today's show, we are going to discuss a Substack. Bless you, baby.
Thank you.
A Substack that you wrote on Friday, talking about being, thinking, and doing.
Yes.
And it's going to be off the hook. So I say we just jump right in.
Okay.
All right. So what was the inspiration for this one?
Oh, I was in the shower and I thought of it.
That was it. Most of your inspiration does come in the shower, doesn't it?
Yeah. And when I say I thought of it, it's not like it's a new concept. But what I mean is that I was thinking about we're like basically moving between, and I'm simplifying something that's a lot more challenging, but we're either being, which is we're like in ourselves, we're conscious of our energy, we're aware of where we are in time and space. We like, know we're being, like we're here right now, which we're somewhat present or mindful, or we're thinking, which is the process of thinking and knowing that not everything we think is true and analyzing. And that's where we get all of our information. And hopefully with thinking, we have an ability to have humility and learn also. And then the last thing is doing, which is obviously a product of our being and our thinking. And I was trying to be cute with the way I wrote it. I wrote it very quickly, so I'm not quite sure it translated. I was like, in my head, I was like, this is so great. But doing, you're hoping that whatever you're doing is because you are in touch with your being and you're conscious of your thinking, and then you act from that place. And I said, what's interesting is a lot of people, when they're doing, aren't at all connected to being and thinking, and they're just like doom scrolling or living on autopilot, and their doing is to avoid being and thinking.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
So that's what I mean. I was trying to get cute. And then also with our thoughts, sometimes being in our thoughts keeps us from being.
Yep.
And sometimes being in our thoughts keeps us from doing, because we talk a lot about who we are and, oh, I'm this or I'm that, but we're really not doing that. So it's like, I can't remember what my last sentence was, but the goal was, being and thinking and doing are all necessary, and disparaging any of them is a waste of time, because all three of them are us.
So these are the directions I might want to go in today.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still sneezy for some reason.
Sneezy. Oh, by the way, I can't find it, but I'm not on social media at all. But the closest thing I have to social media is YouTube, and I watch YouTube Shorts. And there was some showed up in my feed, and it's who's the guy that does Family Feud now?
Steve Harvey.
Steve Harvey. And the two guys are up at the front. They go up to the front.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
And they're doing
they put their hand on the buzzer. And Steve Harvey's question is like, which of this, I just thought it's because you were sneezing, which of the 7 dwarfs would best describe your wife in the bedroom?
And
or
someone
something
said
like that.
Sneezy?
They both looked at each other and refused to answer.
Oh my gosh.
Which is hilarious, because you can only get in trouble.
Wouldn't you just say happy?
Yeah, I guess so. But the other 6, I guess if they both said happy, that would probably be good.
You don't want to say dopey.
You don't want to say dopey. You don't want to say sleepy.
You could say doc.
You could say doc, I guess. Sneezy, who's dopey?
Well, let's do, there's 7. Dopey, sneezy, bashful, doc,
grumpy.
You don't want to be that.
Yeah.
Happy.
Yeah.
And did we already
I think we did them.
Yeah, I think we did.
So anyways, it was just funny that these 2 guys refused to answer. It's almost like it was staged. It was so funny.
It might have been.
So what I want to do maybe today is invite the listeners and invite you and I, as we're talking here, what our center of gravity is between being, doing, and thinking. And what I mean by center of gravity is, where do you spend most of your time? Okay. So maybe we'll get there. Maybe we won't. The other thing is I pulled up a few quotes. I just asked ChatGPT, give me 3 or 4 quotes on being, doing, and thinking. And I think it'd be fun for us to riff off of some of those, because they're from really smart people like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Amelia Earhart. And anyways.
Where is she?
Where's Amelia Earhart? I don't know. What happened to her? I don't think any of us know. And then the last is, there is an intersect of being, doing, and thinking with something I use when I coach guys. of the archetypes.
Sure.
And it's sometimes people describe it as 4 male archetypes, but as far as I could tell, it's 4 human archetypes. It really has little to do with male.
Sweetie, most meaning in our culture is based on the male experience.
Correct.
So most of it could be applied to women, but it wasn't built for women. So therefore we have to jimmy ourselves into your system.
Exactly. So there's a book out there called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Uh-huh.
And obviously King is male. So what I've been taught by some of my mentors is don't say king, say sovereign, because there's Queen Elizabeth, right?
Sure.
But there is a lot of overlap between being, doing, and thinking. So of what I just shared with you, so those are your 3 on-ramps that you can go down, sweetie. You want to go quotes? Do you want to go archetypes?
I don't want to do the archetypes because I will do it, but I don't want to do that first because that's more men living talk.
Right. And I'm with you. I don't want to start with that either, but I think people will get some value out of it regardless if it's men living.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Because it's really the exact same thing of what you're talking about with one exception.
Okay.
So how about we do center of gravity?
Okay.
All right. Being, doing, and thinking. I haven't really thought much about this, but I can tell you, it's funny, I haven't thought much about this. My center of gravity, so I think of like 100%, I would say 82% is doing.
Yeah, for sure. That's why when you're like, I haven't thought about this, I'm like, do you need to think super deep?
I would say 15%, and I might be being overly harsh on myself. 15% is thinking.
Okay.
So that would be 97, and 3% is being.
Okay.
And it's probably not true, but when I think of being, I think of
you don't have to be like in a meditative state. It's more just about are you aware of where you are and what you're doing? Right. Are you in the present moment?
Am I in the present moment?
And I don't mean that you don't have to be doing yoga or meditation. We make it to like a plan you need to get to. And in some ways I want to maybe push back that when people do that, you're in thinking. Well, it's because you're trying to get there.
So right now we're recording about a podcast.
Uh-huh.
We're recording a podcast. That's doing, but I'm also using my beautiful brain to think about what it is I want to say next.
Mm-hmm.
Am I present? I think I go in and out of presence as you and I are going to talk for the next 45 minutes or so. So like even within one moment, there's probably elements of all 3, unless we just switch back and forth.
Well, I actually have a sentence in there where I say what you have to recognize is you're going back and forth between them in a matter of seconds, sometimes minutes, maybe an hour. Like some people do get stuck in a thinking process. Some people are a lot more cerebral, 5s on the Enneagram. They're big, deep thinkers all the time, and they can get really stuck in that. But the truth is, the whole point is I think we sometimes demonize one of them or the other. We're like, this person is always moving, they're doing too much. Or we say, wow, this person's so stuck in their head. Or we say, oh, that person is always worried about being meditative, or they're always like lost in their imagination, or they're lost in their like need to be spiritual. And we like make one of them bad. Mm-hmm. And they all are working in unison constantly. Mm-hmm. And so it's less about, I don't mind this conversation about percentages because that makes sense to me, but
my thinker wants the percentage.
I know you do. And you're trying to box these in as separate things, and they're really not separate. Right. They're all like interconnected, because that's kind of what I mean about the ideal situation with the doing is that what you do on an everyday basis is because of who you are, which is your being and your consciousness of yourself. Then you're thinking about, what does that sound?
It's the blender.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm like hearing the sound. I'm like, is that wind? And then you're thinking about, how do I take who I am and show up in the world? So I'm thinking about the things I say. I'm thinking about the things I want to do. And then our doing should be a product of those things.
Yeah.
What's unfortunate is a lot of times our doing becomes center stage, and we don't really know why we're doing what we're doing. We're just keeping up with the Joneses. Like, for example, can I read something to you? I sent something to my daughter today because I knew that I sent it to everybody, but I knew she would like it the best. And I think I found it on the Sister Project Instagram page. It was from a book that they tagged. Mm-hmm. But this is all it says. It's not really poetry, but it's like a one-page essay. It says, none of it is real. The societal timelines, the expectations, the rules we follow that were set for us by strangers who do not know us and do not know our lives, it's all made up. And yet we let it destroy us. achieve this by that age, get there by this time. It's bullshit. It was created and contrived, fabricated as an invisible yardstick, and we let it pull us around like a rope around our necks. Let it go. I give you permission to let it all go. Observe how much freer you are and how much less of a failure you feel. You haven't failed when none of this is real. And I think a lot of people who are doing are stuck in, there's somewhere I got to get. There's a place I got to get to. There is something I have to get done. There's a way I have to prove myself. And they're not, and their thoughts may be helping them with that, but they're so out of touch with their being. Does that make sense?
It does. And I might go down a little tangent here,
Sure.
but bear with me. So I think I was making smoothies yesterday, and I just pulled up my YouTube and I saw Jeff Foster. Jeff Foster's an author. I think he wrote a book called Daily Awakening or Radical Acceptance, something or other. And he was a really powerful teacher for me. And he presented himself for many, many years as a non-duality person.
Okay.
All oneness. Think all like, I don't know, woo-ish.
Egoless.
No ego and all that. And he said he was calling himself out and other teachers that you and I have probably been inspired by. And he's like, that is such a, even the idea of I'm this and you're that.
Correct.
I'm not
Special.
dual. I'm special.
You're
I'm
not.
one. You're not. And if you follow me, then I'm going to be this and I'm better than you. Like even that is dogmatic, right?
Of course.
So he looks different now. He had some illness, and it was a 15-minute clip.
Lyme's disease.
Was that what it was? And it was a really beautiful thing. He's like, I am now look at how I used to teach about non-duality, and I kind of laugh at myself. He's like, of course we are all one, and at the same time we are human beings, and we get messy, and we have an ego, and the human experience. And what made me think of that is, I think your quote is really good that you just shared and important. And at the same time, there was a line in there that says, none of this is real. That's true. And we do have things that we need to worry about.
I know, but she's not saying that. She's saying what's not real is the fake yardstick that people are following. She's not saying life isn't real. She's not saying this world isn't real. She's saying that what we let destroy us is achieve this by that age, get there by this time.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. It was created and contrived. An invisible yardstick. We let it pull us around. This isn't real because what you're doing right now in the moment, that's real.
Yeah.
Who you love right now, that's real. Your interests are real. The things that you know you're good at are real. But the idea, I was talking to some college students this weekend about this, and the need to focus on this is going to make me money, so I'm going to do it. Yes, I'm going to be miserable and I'm going to hate what I'm doing, but at least I'll be making money. That is the and I understand why people do it. Like it in a capitalist culture, it totally makes sense because it becomes our way of thinking, and we disregard our being and we start doing things that our culture tells us to do.
Yeah.
And the thing is when I'm saying get in touch with your being, I'm not saying so stop doing and stop making money, but why not be in touch with your being at the same time?
Well, this goes back to my balance piece because you're right. I agree with everything you just said, but there's times when I am 100% doing and there is no being happening.
Or the thinking's part of it.
And we know people that are sometimes being and not walking this human walk because they don't think that
they're removed from
they need
it all.
to pay their mortgage or that God will come and pay off their credit card.
Right.
So there's
and then
that
there's
balance.
The thinkers who tell you about how great they are.
Yeah.
And they say, this is who I am. This is what I learned in therapy. I'm this, I'm that, but they don't do from that place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of, language around it. But then you're like, well, what'd you get done today? And they're like, nothing.
So if you're listening to this, you are more likely than not a parent. So just think about this through your parenting lens. And some of you may have kids who are 2. Some of you may have kids who are 12 or 22. What is your balance through the lens of parenting, of thinking, being, and doing? And I could tell you once again, it falls in line with the way I am in other places, which is mostly doing, some thinking, and a little bit of being. And I'll give you one example of me patting myself on the back for just a second.
Sure.
I shared this with you. I'm always moving in the house. Like I'm going to the computer, I'm going for a swim, on my phone. And then my youngest daughter was sitting on the front steps of our house last Friday. And I'm like, God, I really haven't connected with her that much lately. I'm not going to go in and get to work. I'm just going to sit next to her. And within like 10 seconds, I give her a kiss goodnight every night, but it's like, that's almost like, that's what we do. It wasn't spontaneous. And she took my arm and put it around her shoulder. So I was now hugging her. And I just chalk it up being, for at least that moment, I decided I'm not going to ask her questions. I'm not going to try to have a quick conversation so I can get on with my day. I'm just going to sit there. And I feel like she picked up on some vibration from me, knowing that I was available, which is not as often as I wish it were. So anyways.
Yeah. And I think the same conversation that you and I have is and this doesn't take anything away from what you did, because it is good. And it was a shift for you, and you became aware, you were more in being, and what I said to you is, that when you're running around, I'm sitting in the family room on my computer, choosing to work in the middle of the house. So I can do that for them as much as I can, especially this summer when everyone's coming in and out of the house. It doesn't take away from that you did that. I just need to kind of put in that not all moms, but moms are doing that a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like not doing anything or being present. So then that person knows that they can, come and talk to you and not be, or say something to you and you're right there and you can see what they're doing and they'll tell you about their day. And I know you can't do that because you're on meetings all day. So this isn't a pointing the finger that you should be doing it this way. I just sometimes when you say that, it's like maybe it's my ego, but it's like, I do that all the time.
I know.
Do you know what I mean?
I know. And you get the hugs, the metaphorical hugs, the real hugs, the emotional connection. And I'm not going to say I can't, but my doer does not want me to put my computer in the middle of a living space, because then my doer is not going to be able to do his job.
Correct. And I am writing, I am doing emails. There are times that I definitely go to a different space. It's not that I'm doing a Zoom in the middle of the family room when my kids are there, but there is an intention behind where I am all the time.
Yeah.
That's my being.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can go hide. I've got an office downstairs. I got an office upstairs, and then Todd and I share an office. I could go to any one of those, but if I do that, I'm not going to see any of my kids.
Yeah.
And that's not cool to me.
So
that's not fun.
Your beer is
creating my choices around what I'm doing.
Which means your priorities are to be and connect more often than my beer and connector is with our daughters.
Yeah. Well, and it's like it's the loves in order thing. Like the thing when I wake up in the daytime, I don't wake up in the daytime. I wake up in the morning. What's most important to me, this is a Cathy thing, is relationships, right? So I also love my work and I love my alone time. There's all sorts of things I love, but the first thing is relationships. So my day is around relationships. That's my choice. There is, and people don't, there may be people who get more done than I do. So, and I'm putting this in air quotes, so they win the productivity medal.
The doing competition.
And there may be people who read more books than I do. And so they win the thinking medal. Like if we're trying to be like, well, wait a second, there is no doing it right. There is just, are you in your being? And what makes me happy in a day is when, like, I was so bummed, and I hope you're okay with me saying this, but like, Cameron and I were having this great conversation and I went and picked her up and everything's great. And we were talking about her day, and you're such a buzzkill.
I know.
Like he comes in, he hasn't even seen her in a day, and he starts telling her to not spend money on lunch, even though that's the thing she looks forward to the most. Is she DoorDashes for 4 or 5 hours, then she gets a lunch and she comes home, and that's what makes it worthwhile. And you came in and I wanted to look at you and go, God, is that going to be your connection today?
Yeah.
And then she goes upstairs feeling shamed. Now, should she feel ashamed? No, but she did. She was like, because you're like, could you consider maybe eating at home?
Every now and again.
I know. It was just timing, because you haven't been with her.
I haven't connected.
And so the first thing you say to her is, you're spending too much money, which is already something that has bothered her this summer, which is, so there's like this lack of you're doing, which is, I'm going to check off my list, reminding my girls that they shouldn't be spending money, versus the thinking, the being of what do I want to do right now when I see my daughter in front of me? And then you leave and you're like, okay, and then I'm left there to.
What'd she say?
She just looked at me and went up the stairs, and I didn't say anything because, see, I'm stuck in a place where if I say to her, I understand you just want to get a Panera sandwich on the way home because it feels like a good end to then I'm going against you. See, because I don't think her getting a sandwich is a big deal at all. Like, I think that is her way of being like, hard day's work, here's my sandwich, and you're making it about money. And so I'm caught between, if I say to her, go ahead and do that, then I'm going against you, even though I know that's not important to me.
Right.
And she's going to be here 3 more weeks and you're worried about that?
Yeah.
Like, what?
I'm just asking for a little bit of balance.
So, right. So say you are, but then I get your thinking. Like, that's what I mean. So let's go to doing and thinking.
Okay.
Your thinking is, I'm concerned about money, because you're always concerned about money. And I'm trying to teach my girls this. Say to her, I know that you getting your sandwich is really important. What do we say? 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 2 days a week? Humor me. Maybe I'll take you out to lunch one of those days. Like, because it comes across.
I didn't say it as well as you just said it, but I did say, like, can we not like, hey, you're not picking up food after you're done door dashing. It's, can we have a little bit more of a balance? So I did say that, but probably not as gentle as you just described.
And it's really not clear. She doesn't know what that means. Are you going to go to the grocery store for her?
Yeah, I told her I would. Tell me what you want.
Okay, so maybe after we're done, say I'm heading to the grocery store because, are you going to have that available today? Can she get a sandwich today? Like, is there a confusion about, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So like, maybe it's like, it's not clean it up necessarily, because it's not like you did anything harmful or damaging long-term, but maybe clear it up and maybe, say maybe a day a week, 2 days a week. And, I don't know. It just was a bummer because it was like she and I were having this great conversation, and then you come in.
Here I come.
And you come in with the money stuff. And I'm like, God, this is so not important to me.
Yeah.
It would be if she was buying shoes or clothes. All of the clothes she's bought this summer have been with gift cards that she's gotten, and she gets a sandwich like most days that she's working. And I just am like, is that a problem? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. And to you, I don't know what it means to you. Like, what does the sandwich every day mean to you?
It's that we just spend a lot of money. I'm okay with the dinner thing, but like, can't we just have lunch food here? That's it. That's all I want. A little bit, few days a week, because it just seems like it's just a lot of outside food. And you and I obviously have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, and if you can talk to her and get exactly, this kind of bread, then it's all set up and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes maybe it taps a little bit into when I was a kid, because there was a lot of like eat at home, but then there wouldn't be anything to eat at home. So you're kind of stuck between, and I don't mean like the cupboards were bare. I just mean like what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of guilt around it, and yet there wasn't a lot of.
Well, and I have baggage because I would say, I'm going to the grocery store. I would ask one of our kids, what do I get? And she said, they don't have anything good there.
Like 4 years ago, she said that.
Yeah. So it's just me bringing up some of my baggage. Like, they don't have anything good at the grocery store.
I know.
There's a lot of stuff at the grocery store.
I know. I'm very aware. And I think it's, talking about food and eating out and everything, I think it's a very common challenge for families. And I think that I kicked my own butt about it for so many years. The fact that I made meals and prepared things, but I don't really cook, and I don't cook new things. I don't have new ideas. It's not a creative endeavor for me. And it was always a concern and a worry. And it's just one of those things that I just want to put down and not, because you're going to go, and again, I think we've had this discussion before, but you're going to go to the grocery store and get a loaf of bread, a thing of turkey, a quart of milk, a stick of butter. I don't know. And, cheese. And so you're going to come home spending $20 for all that. And maybe that'll work out in a way where, we saved $5 or maybe $7. And I don't know. I just struggle with it. Because I don't know if I
think we both struggle through a different lens.
Yeah, exactly. We're both coming at it differently.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is, okay, great, Todd, you're going to go to the grocery store. It's going to take more time.
More
You're going to
money.
spend almost as much money.
Right.
And
don't you feel like we've nailed breakfast? Everybody here eats breakfast here.
Yeah, I mean, except when we go out to breakfast, but
well, yeah, but that's like brunch on a Saturday or Sunday or something like that. But what I mean is like, nobody's like, go get me a bagel this morning. Like, we all have our own thing that we do for breakfast. We're done with that. Sometimes, occasionally, we make dinner here. Lunches, you and I tend to eat at home most of the time, but it feels like we kind of got it, but maybe not. Maybe like, what's your ideal? Eating here all the time?
No, of course not. I don't like eating in house all the time. I just think that we can balance the scales a little bit. That's all.
All right. It's so general, but all right.
Are you asking me like how many times? Oh, I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, it's just, you know what? It's so not part of this conversation. Like, it's fine. Like, this is something you and I can take off the podcast and be like, okay, what does this mean?
Well, I'm guessing there's a lot of families out there that can
I think there's a
relate to this conversation.
I talk to people about this all the time. I think more so when my kids were little, and like making lunches for school, and there's just all these things. But I feel like I don't know. And maybe someone who's really strictly budgeted, is that a word? Budgeted, could share with me, no, Cathy, over the course of a year, if you do this, this, and this, you will save $6,000 or whatever. Like, I don't want to come off as the know-it-all in this area, because you could be right. I just, when I'm doing it on a monthly basis or a daily basis, it seems like $5 here, $2 here.
Right. And, I'm the one looking at the credit cards and all that stuff. So I get reinforced every month, like, holy crap, it just adds up. That's all. All right. So let's pivot to quotes.
Okay.
Actually, you heard where I feel like my center of gravity is between doing, being, and thinking. 82, 15, 3.
Oh, yeah. I didn't say mine. God, it's hard for me to differentiate my being and thinking a little bit, because I can stare off into space and be thinking, but a lot of what I'm trying to do is get grounded. So they're very intertwined for me. Like if I'm doing yoga, I'm moving and doing, but there's a lot of being in it, let's see, I'm doing all the time. Like, if it's like cleaning the kitchen or on my computer or writing emails or, writing something, like I think doing 40%, because I think that's human. I think my thinking and being maybe 30 thinking, and
it leaves
I hope I'm adding this up right.
It leaves an even 30 for being.
Yeah, I think that's about right. 40, 30, 30.
Yeah, and there's no right answer to that, but
and the reason I'm doing 30, 30 is not because it's always clean and perfectly being and thinking, but because I'm going back and forth. I mean, and you also have to remember, everybody, what I do for a living. What I do for a living is think about being, right? So like, not only for myself personally, but other people, I write about it. I think about it. I talk about it on this podcast. So it's part of my job too. So I think 40, 30, 30.
Yeah. And there's no right answer. It's possible my numbers are way off, but the idea is to look at it and see, what would you like it to be? What would I like it to be? Well, I could tell you the fact that I gave myself 3% of being, maybe I could double that and make it 6% and do a little bit less doing and a little bit less thinking. So it's not like measuring my numbers versus yours. It's me measuring my number of where it is that I want to be.
Yeah. And yours is more general and mine is more on certain days I could get more done. Well, sheesh. I struggle with that sentence because I don't ever not do something someday, but I also am trying to categorize things like, I'm going to go on a walk today, or I'm going to go get coffee with someone, or I'm going to, like when we in this culture say doing, we mean productivity list.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I don't want to put myself in a box of, man, I could be doing more, because I feel like I kind of uncaged that a while ago, because I am productive, like I just finished a book and turned it in 2 weeks ahead of time. Yeah. Like I'm ahead of I'm not a late person, so I can't be critical. But I think what Todd would probably not want from me, but as far as doing is, Could I be marketing better? Could we be doing more, as far as like writing things on Team Zen? Could we be, creating more plans for the future? Like Todd likes meetings and, let's make a plan in a 5-year. And I don't do that very well. And so that would be, I think, in your mind, like you could do more.
Well, it's funny, like, so going to the archetypes real quick. So in a big picture, there's sovereign, which is king or queen, warrior, magician, lover. And lover, I'm going to call is the one who bees, who is, feels. So the lover typically feels, but in this case, I'm going to call it is, the BE.
Is,
okay. Yeah. The warrior does. The warrior gets stuff done.
Okay.
I don't care if you're male, female, we all have warrior in us.
So lover bees.
A lover typically feels, but for this discussion, I'm going to say bees. Or just is. The warrior does. The magician thinks. So that's a thinker.
Magician thinks.
The one thing that is missing is the sovereign, and the sovereign does a few things. One is it sees what is it that we want to create down the road. Big picture planning. All the sovereign also blesses and does things like that. So there's just a lot of alignment between doing, thinking, being, and the archetypes. So just for fun, I just found some quotes on each one of these things.
Okay.
So to be.
To be or not to be?
It is not Shakespeare. Lao Tzu, which I thought was good. And Lao Tzu is who, sweetie?
Lao Tzu? Isn't it Chu? Or is it Sue?
I don't know.
I don't either. Who is he?
Yeah.
He wrote the Tao Te Ching, which came about way, 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 way before the Bible.
Yeah. So just riff off of this quote. Knowing others is intelligence.
And
this is in the to be category. Knowing yourself is true wisdom.
Correct.
Mastering others is strength. And mastering yourself is true power.
Yeah, I love it.
It's pretty good, right?
So knowing others is intelligence. So that is thinking, meaning you have knowledge. Thinking is about knowledge. So you know others, you know things about other people. Yeah. And we spend a lot of time trying to get information about other people. If it be our relationships, we try and analyze the people in our life, to celebrity gossip, to politics. We're trying to know things about other people.
Yeah.
And then he says, knowing yourself is wisdom.
Yeah.
That we need, there's more. If we were to spend more time knowing why we're reacting the way we are, why something bothers us, why we're creating a shift, why those things keep us out of other people's business and keeps us in our own business.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean then we become selfish and, narcissistic and we don't worry about other people? No, because when you know yourself and you are wise, wisdom is compassion.
Yeah.
So you will be kind to people because you feel good in your own skin. So you're not going to become, if you're cruel, that means there's something going on in you you're not looking at.
Right.
So that's the thing we miss, is we're very isolated in our thinking, where we're if I focus on myself, I'm going to become selfish, when really what you're doing is you're getting to know yourself so you become wise.
Yeah. Second quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Okay.
To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment.
Yeah. I actually, it's one of my favorite quotes, and I put it in my book this time for JC. In my book that's coming out, JC, Cameron, and Skylar write something for it. And JC wrote something about expectation and how challenging that's been for her. And I used that quote when talking about her because, she's a big observer, and she's looked around the world a lot, and she notices what everybody else is doing. And I think her work, and will continue to be, just because of the kind of person she is to stay yourself, stay yourself, because she's so influenced. And this sounds like she's influenced, meaning she's trying to be like other people, not in the way they look and are. JC's got her own. JC's so interesting as far as she's got her own look. She's got her own vibe.
She's not a conformist.
She's not a conformist, but she does worry about, as far as my future, am I doing things the right way? And that's what she watches. And she feels the expectation or the disappointment if she doesn't feel like she's, that quote that I read before about, this is not, the one I read that was from the book.
Sure.
That I sent to her, and she's like, I needed that today. Remember that this isn't real.
Yeah.
The
rat race of life. and
exactly.
our kids compare themselves to whoever happens to be quote unquote doing the best.
Correct. And that in the people who are like, I'm doing the best and I'm struggling, I'm suffering and I'm figuring it out, but I'm working and I'm moving up the mountain. She's like, should I be struggling and suffering? Should I be moving up the mountain? Don't we all do this? This isn't a JC thing. It's just.
Well, one example on JC is she applied to one school, got accepted and accepted the invitation or whatever it is. And she knew where she was going probably like what, in January of
She knew where she was going in September, Todd.
September.
Isn't that crazy?
Meanwhile, our other kid
applied to
12 schools and made a later choice, I guess.
Yeah.
March or April. And I remember JC having a moment like, oh my God, my friends are so stressed out because they didn't know what school they were choosing or getting into or whatever, or accepted from.
Right.
She's like, what's wrong with me?
Or like, she said, should I be stressed out?
Yeah.
Like, did I? And the thing is, we made sure she understood it's a blessing to know where you want to go to school. Like, that's not a problem you need to create into a problem. But that is what I mean about, you can have really good gut instincts about who you are, but you still have to live within the outside world. Like the people you talked about, the being people, like people, maybe nuns who live in a monastery or monks who live in a seminary, or all they have to focus on is being, because they're not being influenced by the outside world as much. You know, they obviously live amongst each other, but they're not dealing with heavy traffic or constant news or 24/7, social media. So their being is simpler. And so when we're trying to be and think and do in the culture we're living in, even if you have a great sense of yourself, you're still going to be influenced.
Yeah.
So,
third quote. Soren Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards.
So you kind of said that like Chandler.
Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. That's interesting, because if we're understanding the backwards, we're not present in this moment.
Why don't you think about it this way? The quote that I say to the girls all the time is, my dad told me, as you are going through life, you're going to look back and you're going to see that some of the things that you did that didn't make sense at the time will start to come together like puzzle pieces, and you will understand why everything happened. I'm not doing a everything happens for a reason thing. That can be very triggering, and I'm not suggesting every single thing is a good thing. What I'm saying though is every single experience we've had, good, bad, indifferent, ugly, beautiful, it starts to come together into a big puzzle, and you start to see it. So I think the quote that you just read is about, you can see your life really well in hindsight, but when you're going forward and you don't, like, for example, we'll go back to JC, her greatest, she has 1 year of college left. She doesn't know what's going to happen in her life. And it's so scary. It is for everybody their age. It is when you get out of high school, it's just scary. And we sometimes, because we're already in this phase of life, we're like, it's so fun where you are. It's so fun. It's such a party. It's scary for them.
Sure.
Because they can't see it.
And we have since forgotten how scary that could be.
Totally. Because we have all this hindsight where we're like, everything works out. You pay attention. You can see it. We have the gift of the full body experience. Like, we have
amnesia of
total amnesia.
How we struggled. I remember I graduated from college and I'm like, okay, what now?
Right.
I gotta, what?
Put on a suit?
And I remember being like, all right, so I have a job, and then in May, I don't have a summer vacation.
Right.
Like, adults have to work the whole time except for 2 weeks. Like, how'd this happen?
I remember when I was working at the hospital and just the way that the days were, and this would happen in the summer sometimes too, but more in the winter, where I would leave when it was dark and come home when it was dark. And I was like, I don't see the sun anymore.
Yeah.
Like, for someone who, and again, I was like 27 years old, 28 years old. That didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, is this life?
Yeah.
And again,
is this what we sign up for?
Is this what we sign up for? And it is for periods of time. And that's the thing, is things that isn't forever, but that is now.
Yeah.
And if it's really bothersome, you have to figure out how to not make that the way it is. If it's that you go outside for lunch, or if it's that you don't do that job anymore and you figure out that I have to be not inside of an office all day. It's relative.
One more quote and then we're going to go to thinking. Okay.
Okay.
It's from Rumi. And this is under the B/lover quadrant.
Okay.
Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. That sums it all up.
Yeah.
And I could see how people can weaponize that the other way too. Like, hey, if you just follow what you love, then you're not going to make it.
Which, do you believe that?
No, but there's a balance, just like there isn't anything else. Like we've even talked about this between Liz Gilbert's interpretation of your love, your artistic nature,
Creative
and don't
endeavor.
try to monetize what it is that you love, because then it cheapens it. And then the opposite extreme is Tony Robbins, who said many times, if you want to take the island, burn the boats, which basically means don't leave yourself any possibility of failure. In other words, put yourself head first into what you love. And if you really love it, then you will, quote unquote, make it.
Right.
So those are two opposite extremes. And I think the answer is always somewhere in between.
Right. And I think that life circumstances, dictate that. Like, I still believe, and will always believe, I don't care how old you are, move toward what you love.
Yeah.
Move toward what you love. You may be in a situation where you have to make a certain amount of rent, or something happens to you, medical bills have to be paid. Like, life circumstances can get in the way, where you have to take a waitressing job, or you have to do some babysitting, or you have to be a nanny on top of all the other stuff you're doing, because you have to make ends meet. Like, my big but is, it would make me sad that you would let go of the parts you do love. You might have to let go of it a little bit, but you somehow keep it for yourself, because that's what makes life meaningful.
Yeah.
So if you only move toward money, and you're like pushing aside the things that make life meaningful, then what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And so when someone's like, Cathy, you don't understand my circumstance, and you don't understand, and you don't understand. I do. And you do what you have to do. There was a period of time in my life when I was working full time, going to school 3/4 time, and having an internship all at the same time. And that's what I had to do. And I didn't sleep that much. And I was going from one thing to the next, and, driving around in circles trying to find a parking space in Chicago when I got home, and barely, talk about eating out. Like, I think I didn't even have anything in my fridge. It was just, I was living by the seat of my pants. And we have years like that. Sometimes people have decades like that. My big but is, the thing I did appreciate, though, is I was in school for something I loved.
Yeah.
Right. Didn't love the internship. My work was pretty rough, but I was at least feeling like, well, at least I'm going in the right direction.
I need, because I haven't played any quotes yet, I'm going to play one quote from Dead Poets Society, and then we're going to move over to thinking.
Okay.
Maybe. Mr. Hopkins, you may agree with them, thinking, yes, we should simply study our Mr. Pritchard and learn our rhyme and meter and go quietly about the business of achieving other ambitions. I have a little secret for you. Huddle up. Huddle up. We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "Oh me, oh life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless,
That's about it.
of cities
Yeah.
filled."
But yeah, love it.
That's it, right? Okay. So I have all these quotes are really good, and I'm afraid I'm not going to get to them all. So I just want your one quick
Okay.
take.
I'll be quick.
If I can find out where I am. Okay. So this is about thinking. So this is a magician. Rene Descartes. You know that one, don't you? What is it?
To think, I think, therefore I am.
There you go. Albert Einstein. Any ideas what his quote is?
No.
We cannot solve our problems.
Oh, yeah. With the same mind that created them.
Boom. Socrates.
Socrates.
The unexamined life is not worth living. Okay.
He's in my office. Socrates. It was my dad's.
This one's a little tricky. We might have to spend a minute on it. William James. A great many people think they are thinking when they're merely rearranging their prejudices.
Sure.
So help me with that.
I think that what comes into my mind when I hear that is, I think, for example, last week I wrote about how we sometimes are unwilling to confront the issue in front of us, and instead we spend all of our time thinking about how to categorize it as okay. Like, so for example, if we notice that something's going on with our kid, instead of saying to our kid, hey, are you doing all right? Because I'm noticing a difference, we will think about it, journal about it, talk to our partner about it, talk to our friends about it, talk to our therapist about it, and try and convince ourselves it's not something we need to do anything about because we don't want to deal with the thing. So we recategorize it as teen angst. And we're like, see, it's teen angst. I don't need to do anything. And that is rearranging our prejudices. Prejudice is a strong word. So but I think sometimes it's us rationalizing our negative thoughts as being okay and us being okay with everybody else changing except us.
You ready for Thomas Edison? It's a little harsh.
Oh boy.
5% of the people think, 10% of the people think they think, and the other 85% would rather die than think.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's, being facetious kind of, or trying to make a point. He's exaggerating is probably a better word. But this is kind of, Todd, what I've been talking about since I got home from my weekend. Like, there's a lot of people who would rather just keep doing what they're doing than actually think about what they're saying and what they're doing, because then they would have to question so many other things.
Right. Look inward, look at the mirror.
Correct. And if I start to unravel that ball of yarn, that could get messy. Messy
and energy expending.
Correct.
It's tough. It's easier just to kind of float through life and not think. Blaise Pascal. All of humanity's problems stem from, in this case, man's ability. It didn't say, because women weren't around back
we weren't
then.
around. We weren't around.
All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone.
For sure.
I will just really quickly riff on that. I do have a meditation practice. It's sporadic. I get uncomfortable sitting in a room alone.
For sure. And that shock experiment where people were much...
Right. They would rather shock themselves and sit.
Than be alone.
Yeah. It's so crazy. I would be the one shocking myself.
You're like,
sure.
I'll take it.
I'm a little bored. Let's do something.
Well, and Todd, it's interesting because I want to make sure to not put you in a category of unwilling to look at your thoughts, because I don't think that's the case. I think you do have an underlying... A lot of the things that I challenge you on in our relationship, I kind of know where they come from because I know you so well. And I don't mean I know you better than yourself. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like, I know the money stuff isn't always thought through. You're just working from a fear. I know that a lot of the I don't want to be alone stuff is childhood stuff of, if I don't have people around me, my parents are going to fight and it's going to be uncomfortable. I know the I got to keep moving thing is I'm feeling stuff. And if I keep moving and go ride my bike, I don't have to feel things.
Sure.
So, I don't think you do bad things and then try to not think about it. I think you just have this like history of, trauma where it, but it's hard to not react from that place.
Yeah.
So it's because I think why I'm differentiating is I think a lot of people don't look at their behavior
Yeah.
and they're like, I don't want to see it. Your behavior is very good.
Well, I definitely investigate my reactivity. I'm not one of those guys.
You don't hurt people.
Yeah. Hurt people. Sweetie.
Right.
Last one. Lao Tzu. Stop thinking and end your problems.
Yeah, it's true. It's very Byron Katie.
Right.
I mean, Lao Tzu said it first before Byron Katie, but questioning your thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, you can make the great thing about meditation is the goal is not don't think, it's noticing your thoughts. And then you see how wrapped up you are in something that doesn't really even exist.
Yeah.
And if you question it, it starts to like float away like you're blowing on a dandelion. And you're like, oh my God. So all that energy, it's not even real.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's a real thing, like there's a bill on my desk I have to pay, or I have a kid who's sick and I have to deal with it. But at least you can give your energy to that.
Sure.
And not be worried about like your dad last night was telling a story. I'll keep names out of it, but it was something about he ran into Faye Dunaway. That name I'll keep in there. And he said that she looked at him and was judging him. And
he decided he knew what a glance
from Faye Dunaway.
And there's so many layers of comedic value in this story.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why I'm not telling the basic part.
The one I chose to highlight is that how can any of us with any degree of certainty know what a glance, what a stare
means.
I think it's such a terrible, and he's like, I know people. I know when people give me that look. And I'm not saying that there's no ability to pick up on body signals, but I also know that it is sometimes terribly inaccurate.
Well, and I think what he knows is himself. And when he stares at people, he's judging them.
Sure.
So he's like, when he says, I know people,
Yeah.
he doesn't know everybody. He just knows what he's thinking.
Yeah.
And then we think it's kind of like, projection is when you start to say, well, these people are corrupt and they're evil and they're this. And a lot of times that's what that person is doing. Sure. And they're projecting it on everybody else because that's what they do. So they'll be like, there's no way that these people aren't corrupt because I'm corrupt, So there is, but it just made me laugh because first of all, then we figured out it may not have even been Faye Dunaway.
Yeah. And he may not have been at that place.
It was a lot of energy towards something that maybe didn't happen.
Finally, the to-do, which is the warrior. The warrior gets stuff done. Amelia Earhart, the most effective way to do it is to do it.
Right.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. That's kind of awesome.
Wait, can I go back to the most effective way to do it? And, and again, I'm not claiming to be the expert in doing because that's not necessarily
Sweetie,
true.
I'm the expert because I do it 82% of the time.
But I think historically, one of the conversations, this is just a sliver of doing, is like, let's talk about the, like a conference that you and I are putting together. And there's a lot of talk and a lot of meetings about things we should do.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, if you think of something, just do it.
Yeah.
Quit having a meeting about it.
Yeah.
Quit figuring out the best way to do it and just do it.
Yeah.
If you want to send an email, send the email.
Right.
And so my form of doing, I hate meetings. I think meetings are just a place where people kind of bloviate about what their goals are.
There's a lot of unproductive time happening in meetings.
And people are like, and then I was in charge of this, and then here's what I thought. And then this person said this. And I'm like, okay. And it's not because I'm so highly productive. It's because I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
Like I already know your job. And I already know that I'm thinking you're doing a good job. Like you don't need to convince me because if we're working together, I'm already like, you got this,
right.
And so that's my, even though you can win the doing medal.
Yeah, I win.
That's my sliver
as long as I win.
Of where sometimes I don't understand the hyper consciousness.
I think what you're saying is sometimes I plan so much I never
you don't do
get
it.
around to the doing.
So you'll tell me things like, with the conference, like we should do this different this year and we should make this plan. And I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm not saying I'm doing it the right way or the most, productive way.
I'd rather like break it and fix it on the way. And I'm trying to assemble this perfectly laid out plan that we execute from step one to step 2.
That's it. I'm like, you'll be like, we should, email schools. I'm like, oh, I did that like a month ago. I emailed all the social workers, and I'm not waiting to check a box. It's just, I think of social workers. And so I email them. Yeah. And I think sometimes the plan makes us feel good, but we're not doing anything.
We have 2 more quotes.
Okay.
Benjamin Franklin, well done is better than well said.
Yeah.
So what I thought about this, and I'll just bring it back to you and I, there's times when I have said, because sweetie, you show up in such a loving way 99% of the time in our family.
99.2.
99.2.
Or maybe 98.8.
But I have invited you, just not be there for the girls all the time, or be grumpy or be in a bad mood. I'll say that to you.
Yeah.
And then when you actually are grumpy and are in a bad mood, then all of a sudden I get all jacked up and I'm like, oh, what's happening? And I just need to fawn you so that I can feel good about myself.
Yeah.
That's the difference between saying and doing. So I'm saying to you, sweetie, I'll invite your mess. Your mess is welcome here.
Right.
But the minute you show up with a mess, then I'm not able to hold the mess.
You're not the only one.
I know.
Well, I think people will always say, why don't you lean on me or tell me things or let me do that? And then when I do, they're like, ooh, that's no bueno. And so that is, and I have plenty of people who do support me. This isn't like a cry for help. It's just more like, and I don't think I'm alone. I think that's the case with moms a lot. I think, who was I just having this conversation with? And they were saying, I know, Jay-Z. There was a lot of conversation about she's starting to say what she needs and do what she wants. And when there's a game night, she doesn't want to play, or when there's a parade they're supposed to go to, she doesn't want to go. And the whole family's so uncomfortable with it. But they're like, Mom, go be happy. Do what you want to do. But then when she does, they don't like it.
Who are we talking about right now?
I don't want to say because
okay.
I'm trying to not.
Sounded like you said Jay-Z. Okay. Sorry. I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was just that conversation.
Well, and I've had friends in my life who said, Todd, I want your mess because you're always so controlled. You're always so calculating. You always have your stuff together. And there's times when I do show them my messy side of myself, but there's a part of me it's like, you can't handle my mess. So I'm not even going to show it to you.
Ooh. So you feel like, so is it you can't handle my mess or I can't handle having you see my mess?
It's probably the latter, but it's safer for me to say the former.
So because what would your mess look like? Because I live with you and you're not super messy.
I know. Yeah.
And are you saying like, ooh, I could be messy?
And the messy one is the below the line, critical, judger, blamer, victim, all that stuff.
Okay, so it's not your best self.
No, not at all.
And I can't stand the word best self. It's not, you love the above the line, but it's your regulated self because that's
my responsive self.
Responsive self. Yeah.
People are saying your messy self, they're saying your reactive self. The one who doesn't think, the one who's not discerning.
Why do people want that?
Because they think it's being held in. I'm talking about Treese, by the way.
Okay.
He thinks I'm pushing it all down. And when you push stuff down and you don't let it out, it will become toxic. It will become a disease.
Okay. I hear that. And I'm not saying he's wrong. That's a very general way of you push down toxicity, it becomes disease. Okay. But I also think we can have feelings and learn how to regulate them and not take them out on people.
Yeah.
So like I have plenty of feelings, and I'll be plenty sad. Still haven't cried, by the way. I was telling Todd something that really hurt me this weekend. I can't cry because I'm so defensive about it. Like I know exactly what's happening. I'm trying to like maintain my 25-year-old self. But we may say, well, you're pushing down those feelings. And what I'm doing is working them through and helping myself stay regulated. I'm talking about them. I'm writing about them. I'm moving. I'm still trying to cry about it, which is weird, right? Because I tell everybody I cry every day, but I can't cry about this thing. And so, but I'm not becoming toxic. Do you know what I mean? Like I think well,
you're working it through, but that's a healthier way of working it through than my way, which is go to my computer and and work on emails.
Okay. But I think you don't give yourself enough credit. I think you do work things
through. I'm generalizing. Of course, there's times when I work things through.
Yeah, I think you do.
Like I just talked to a good buddy of mine who's struggling. He just had to move his mom from California to Chicago, put her in an Alzheimer's memory care program.
So hard.
He had all these other things that happened to him. And he's like, yeah, but they're first world problems because at least I have enough money to put my mom in a place. And I'm like, dude, and I even own my projection because everything I tell my friends or clients to do, it's a lot of times I have not been able to do it myself. So what I told him was, you need to give yourself space to be mad and sad of the horrific week that you've had. His dog died of 20 years. And I'm like, you got to let all that move that energy through. But my warning to him is like, don't bypass this spiritually saying, well, at least you have money, or at least you had the dog for 20 years. Instead, just feel the anger and the grief and all the other feelings. And I'm telling him to do that when many of the times I'm unwilling to do that.
Right. And I think there's two things going on there. Number one, like you said, there's a spiritual bypassing, jumping over it to not feel it, but it's also what we call comparative suffering. And that's clinical terminology. Comparative suffering is where we don't feel like we have the right to share our grief about something because someone else is suffering more than us. The thing that people have a hard time understanding is grief. And so even though you can look at the outside world and say, but theirs is worse, you're having the same kind of feelings in your body. Do you see what I mean? So the outside, what has happened may have more of a boom initially, or there's more that they have to figure out and plan for. But when, and I'll just use, because I think you said something about their dog. When you lose a pet or a dog, that is devastating. And to say like, oh, it was just a dog. Nobody who has a dog or a pet ever says it's just a dog. Everybody knows how much you love an animal.
Forget about it.
And to be like, yeah, but at least it's not a person, or at least it's not a kid. What a waste of your energy.
Well, it's funny you talk about comparative suffering, and I think you probably taught me this is, the minute you're comparing pain is not a good thing. And I remember Billy Corrigan, who's a lead singer for Smashing Pumpkins. I love the Smashing Pumpkins. Billy is an interesting individual. Let's just say that. But I do remember some gold that some wonderful words of wisdom that he shared in an interview one time. And I might even close the show with the song, because he was suicidal when he was doing Siamese Dream. And he has had people come up to him because he had a lot of trauma as a younger boy.
Kid, yeah.
And he said, trauma is trauma. And they're the minute like, oh, well, what happened to you? And let me compare it to what happened to me. And he's like, forget about all that. Like, and I actually think there is levels of trauma, but at the same time, it's not necessarily that healthy of a thing to do. So.
Well, and then we start to get into minutia. Like, there are people who do things like, oh, I was molested as a kid. I was molested. Well, you were molested 3 years and I was molested only for 3 months or 3 times. And so therefore your pain, I mean, you guys, like, we don't need to play that game.
No.
That's a thinking game.
Yeah, right.
That's a comparative suffering game. That's a, like, I'm not worthy game. I'm not worthy of my grief.
Sure.
That I'm only worthy of my grief if the most catastrophic thing happens. And if I can't find any light, then I'm worthy of my grief. But hopefully every human being, no matter what happens, there's a light somewhere.
Yeah.
If it be a person, if it be a dog, if it be a job they love, if it be having enough money to handle it, like, hopefully there's something that gets you through, or else what are we doing?
Yeah.
We are such a hedonistic society that believes we should be suffering. So we have this binary of, we should be able to have fun, and I'm an American and I deserve everything, and give me the money, and, give me the quick fixes. And at the same time, we like internally suffer about all of it. And we don't think we're good enough, and we don't think we're worthy of it. And that's why marketing is so effective on us.
Sure.
Because we look at people in the commercial on the new med, and even though it's telling us we could bleed out and we could have migraines the rest of our life and we could lose a limb, we're like, yeah, but that med makes me happy.
Yeah.
Like that person there, And again, I'm not demonizing meds. Meds are fine, but it's the way we're marketed.
The messaging,
yeah, exactly.
So any final thoughts?
No,
Okay.
I feel good.
So you have a women's group tomorrow on Team Zen. If you don't know what Team Zen is, click on the link. It's Cathy and a bunch of listeners from the podcast to.
Yeah, so if you need like a women's group, like you're like, I need women to, like, even if you just need to be a voyeur and listen to what women are experiencing and kind of find a sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? So you don't feel alone.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, lots of people are going through things. Join Team Zen, and every month we have a women's circle. That alone
is worth it.
Yeah. Then we have like 10 million other things. So,
and then I also want to say thank you to Jeremy Kraft, Bald Headed Beauty, painting and remodeling throughout the Chicagoland area, 630-956-1800. And we're going to close with a little piece of Disarm by Smashing Pumpkins.
That little child inside of me, and such a part of you. It's burn. It's burn. I used to be a little boy.